Welcome to my second video. This is going to be a shorter and less boring version of my first video titled The Educated Truth Behind Hydraulic Fracturing. I'm going to be pretty much doing a quick review of a paper called Hydraulic Fracturing 101. This 68-page beauty was written by George King, and it has tons of information that I think would be super useful for anybody interested on the subject, because it goes through everything you really need to know about the risks involved in hydraulic fracturing. So I've actually gone through and taken out some important information, written notes, so if you don't want to, you actually don't have to go and read through this, but I will have the title of the paper down below. I personally think one of the biggest problems surrounding this whole fracking issue is how the media and activists and your neighbor, your dog, your mom, everybody has come to define the act of fracking. The general public has come to define every process within the well development as fracking, whereas in engineering terms, according to Mr. King, it's a stimulation activity limited to the fluid action in initiating and extending cracks within the rock itself. Just to give a little bit of history on fracking, the first frac was actually completed in 1947, and it became commercially acceptable in 1950. To date, there have been only over 2.5 million fracs done worldwide, with at least 1 million of those done in the US. The biggest argument against fracking are the fact that people claim it contaminates fresh water sources. That can be done in one of two ways: through methane contamination or through the fluids used in the fracturing process itself. Gasland likes to point out there are hundreds upon hundreds of different chemicals used in the fracturing process. For your regular slick water frac that the majority of the United States would see, there's really only between 1 and 5 chemicals used. You can actually find lots of the chemicals used in your day-to-day life. For example, the friction reducer used is a common absorbent in baby diapers. Biocides are antimicrobial, and they're used in hospitals, in drinking water disinfectants, and in lots of over-the-counter skin antiseptics. And scale inhibitors are similar to detergents. Hydrochloric acid is one of the more dangerous chemicals, but if you look at it, it's used in swimming pools and to clean bricks. Any acid pumped down the well is usually spent within the first few inches of hitting the formation, and no live acid is ever returned to surface. In any hydraulic fracturing job, there's only about 0.015% of the overall volume used that actually comprised of any of these chemicals. And of that, about 20 to 40% is actually returned to surface. Another main contamination is methane. Now, this methane fits under two main categories: biogenetic, which is methane found in natural seeps, and thermogenetic, which is methane that's been migrated up from the actual pay formation. There are literally thousands of naturally occurring land and subsea oil and gas seeps all over the globe. It is estimated that between 10 to 15 billion cubic feet of methane is naturally vented into our atmosphere. A big proponent for methane found in people's drinking water could come from water wells that have been drilled through naturally occurring shallow coal seams. These coal seams contain tons and tons of dissolved organic material. Another thing to keep in mind is the depth that we're actually finding oil and gas. Nearly all fresh water is found within the first 1,000 feet or 300 meters of surface. The typical shale formation is upwards of 7,000 feet or 2,100 meters deep. When you frac these pay zones, the vertical frac growth is usually less than 300 feet. And this is proven through countless microseismic studies done on oil and gas wells all over North America. Another thing to keep in mind is that the oil and gas has been kept in the reservoir for millions of years thanks to dozens of naturally occurring barriers. These naturally occurring barriers are also what's going to protect us from any sort of upward migration of hydraulic fracturing fluids or the oil and gas itself once it's been drilled into. The volumes of water used for hydraulic fracturing are actually relatively low when you compare them to agricultural, municipal, or recreational use. And any water used within the production of oil and gas is done so under permits from either the provincial, the state, or the federal government. Nobody's out there taking water that they're not permitted to. Any water that's recovered that isn't able to be cleaned is pumped down disposal wells. This leads me into my final point: earthquakes. The only time a frac produces a measurable signal is when the instruments used to measure seismic activity are actually really close to the frac. On the Richter scale, anything below a magnitude of 3 is not able to be felt. Seismic activity from fractures usually measure between -4 to -0.5. There have never been any proven links between hydraulic fracturing and earthquakes measuring a magnitude greater than 3. However, there has been a few cases where deep injection wells have been linked to some seismic activity. Deep injection disposal wells are usually thousands and thousands of feet deeper than any sort of oil and gas pay zone. The last point I want to leave you with is that there is an estimated 1,000 trillion cubic feet of recoverable shale gas beneath North America. This amount alone could supply our nation's natural gas needs for over 45 years. Thanks for watching. I really hope this video motivates you to find more out about the facts behind hydraulic fracturing. Another tidbit of methane information is this little pie chart found within this Hydraulic Fracturing 101 paper that depicts the human activity related methane sources in the US. As we can see here, this piece of the pie represents the natural gas and petroleum's methane source, and that accounts for about 22.7%. Up here is the methane that coal mining contributes, and that's at about 13.3%. This tiny sliver is methane that's related to combustion, and that's actually at 1.6%. The biggest pieces come from our land and wastewater, and that's at 27.3%. And the largest one is actually agriculture at 35.2%. So as we can see, natural gas isn't actually one of the biggest contributors.